Hey everybody, welcome to our first painting study. I'm really excited. This is going to be super fun. And I'm just going to walk you through how this is going to work. So I'm not going to be giving you the step-by-step for this. I think that would just probably take too much time. It would be like a 12-hour course instead. So we're starting off by painting our background the same way that we've always done before, except you're going to notice a huge difference, and that is how thick the paint looks. And the reason why the paint looks so thick is because I gessoed the paper first. So if you're not familiar with what gesso is, it's a primer. So like for instance, let's say you have a shirt. And if you wet up the shirt, it's super porous and the water is going to be able to like seep through it, right? Same thing is true with canvas. So if you get like a roll of canvas and it hasn't been gessoed first, you're basically just getting fabric. And if you put paint on it, the paint's just going to seep right through it. But if you put a gesso on it or a primer, it actually like gets rid of all the pores in there and makes it into a surface that you can paint on without it kind of going through. Well, you can also apply gesso to paper because paper is a porous product as well, and as we could see with the previous lessons that we've done, that when you apply your paint to it, it really does bleed into the surface of the paper. So when you put gesso on top of your paper, you can now paint on top of it without having that happen, and it's going to be a little thicker and it's going to be easier for you to layer paint on top of each other. It's going to act more like an acrylic paint. So that's what we're going to be doing with this, and a gesso, like we've talked about it in this class as well. You can use whatever kind you want. You could use a white gesso, a gray gesso, or a black one. Totally up to you as the artist. Okay, so this painting is kind of interesting because, well, I'll tell you a little bit of the story, but I don't want to go too much into the art history of it because really this is about the composition of it. But the story really does matter as far as the composition. So the story is that this monk, Pedro de Zaldivia. Well, anyhow, there's this bandit. This bandit was going around and terrorizing the entire town. Father Pedro captures this guy by shooting him in the thigh. And the whole story just like sweeps across Spain and becomes this huge like event that this humble monk, barefoot monk, captures this bandit. And Goya was so fascinated by the story, and a lot of people took this story and created it into paintings in their own renditions, and Goya was one of them. And he wasn't commissioned for this, he just did this for fun. And he created like a series of 6 paintings about the event, kind of like a comic strip. And this was one of them, the big moment where this guy that Zaldivia captures Marigato. Very exciting. Okay, so the action of this event was that he shoots him, right? So when you are creating your compositions, you really want to think about, if you do have actions involved, how are you going to capture that still frame in an image? Now, I talk about film a lot because it's part of like who I am, and I worked in film for so long, and I think about things almost like moving images. And if you were to freeze frame like your a movie that you love, what would the image be on the screen right there? And does that image tell a story? And the reason why people in film make the big bucks is because they really do think about every single frame that they're shooting, and where everything is composed in a way that they know exactly where you will look in the movie. New filmmakers may not know exactly where to point their camera, just like new artists might not necessarily know where to put all the important elements in their frame. So the two kind of work hand in hand, and the telling the story and where to put your elements in a way that you know exactly where your viewer is going to look, and how it's going to convey an emotion to your audience. Okay, so anyhow, this piece in particular I chose because there's great action happening and there's a freeze frame of it. But it also does have a very pleasing way of being laid out. Like if you look at it at this moment in time, we do have this L shape. So that vertical line on the left-hand side is kind of filling up that space in the rule of thirds. Similar to the horizontal line on the bottom is kind of filling in that gap of the rule of thirds as well. But as we continue to add our elements, we have a couple other principles of composition come into play. One is the dynamic feel of the golden triangle, where the action is quite literally diagonally cutting through the frame. And you do have that line with him and his gun shooting the bandit, and the bandit is kind of turning, he's like, oh, don't shoot me. The way the bandit is turned really does kind of play into the movement that we talked about when moving your subjects. Like, how weird would it be if there's this big action happening and then Marigato, the bandit, is just like straight up and he's just not moving, not trying to get away. Like, that doesn't make any sense, right? So having movement within the characters and having movement within their actions is part of how you build the scene. And how would you do it in a way where it creates a line, like this diagonal line that really does cut through the piece? It makes it really pleasing and interesting to the viewer. Okay, so as you see while I'm creating with the paint, and you notice too that I'm also painting with blue and orange. And I did that purposefully because I knew that this would be the first painting that you're doing on your own without me walking you through step by step. And I didn't want things to change too much. Because first of all, we also gessoed our paper, so it's going to have a different feel in that way. And so I didn't want to have color be another factor into you figuring things out. One more thing too is we're not going to be painting detail too much. This is something that I truly struggle with because I think I really love detail. But something funny that happens too when you teach is that you really start analyzing your own work and saying, like, if I'm teaching this, why am I not doing this in my own pieces? And that happened to me a lot while teaching this course. It's like, you may know these things, but then when you start looking at how your work is reflected in the things that you're teaching, you're like, well, you better like practice what you preach, kind of thing, right? So I think in the future, after this course, you're going to see a big change in my work as well. But what I'm trying to get at here is that we learned that detail work really does pull forward, and things that are blurry and less saturated do fall into the distance. So we can create a really dynamic painting, kind of like what we are doing at this moment in time, by only using 2 colors plus white and black, and really playing with the blurriness, the saturation. And saturation really is like the strength of your pigment, your strength of your color, and you can create a really interesting piece. Totally forgot what how I started that. I forgot where it doesn't matter. Let's move on. Okay, so I think we're talking about color, and I'm only using 2 colors, but you can still create an interesting piece. But details, that's what we're talking about. Don't go into details too much with this. This is not meant to be something that you're like selling, and you shouldn't be anyhow, because we're studying someone else's work. But you don't really need details in this because we really are thinking of compositions in these studies as blocks of shape and blocks of color. Don't think of it as trying to outline anything. Just kind of put lines in. Put the lines in where you're seeing them form, and you can build on top of it, almost like sculpting with a ball of clay. And you'll kind of see what I mean by that as we go. You start off with just 1 color or 1 shade, whatever, and you can build on top of it and shift it and mold it the way you want to. You'll also notice that I am using a flat brush, and this flat brush I believe is a number 2. It's not too wide, but it's also not too narrow either. And I think I do like making these sketches, these thumbnail sketches with a flat brush because they're really dynamic. You could do a lot with them. So you can pull it flat and get a really nice wide line. You can kind of put it upright and drag it on its side to give it a thinner line. You can really create some nice waves with it, and you can use the point of the brush to get a little bit of like some dots in there, some details when it comes time to like add any details. But yeah, so think about what paintbrush you're using, but again, I can only suggest things to you. Ultimately, it is up to you as the artist about how you're going to move forward with this. Okay, so we are starting to add in a few of the details, and you may notice that there are things that I have in the scene at this moment in time that I end up just painting over, meaning that even though the elements in the scene were in the original photo, I am painting over it to get the main dominant elements into the piece. And this is completely fine because, again, this is a study. And the way that we're using this is to kind of learn from the masters about how they composed their images. And we can take what we've learned from them and apply it to our own style and our own work. So a lot of people are going to say, why are we copying the masters? And isn't this cheating? So I don't know. I think that's I hear this a lot, and that's why I'm bringing it up. And I think it's such an odd thing to be concerned about when learning, because we learn by copying. I mean, I even think about my daughter right now. She's 2, and she's in the parrot phase where she'll copy me almost verbatim and my movements, where I'll be like, oh, you want some froyo? I think I just want froyo right now, so I use that as the example. And she'll be like, oh, you want some froyo? But we learn by imitating, by imitation. Now, my daughter's not going to grow up to be me, Beth, right? She's going to grow up to be her. But there are going to be some things that she takes from me, like maybe she loves froyo. Or maybe, like she says or does things in a similar way because she learned it from me. But she's a different person. And the same thing is true when we are learning from our favorite artists. We're not going to become the artist, and we're not going to try to take their art and pretend like it's ours, right? But we can take what we've learned from them and we can apply it to our work. And it's just how it is. Like if you take the time to learn about artists, your favorite artists, like I know Van Gogh is an artist that people love. And he took tricks from Hokusai. Hokusai was one of his favorite artists. And if you look at The Great Wave by Hokusai, and then you look at Starry Night, you'll see the similarities because Van Gogh took, ideas from The Great Wave, that piece. So when you're copying these things, it doesn't mean that you are going to, it's not cheating. I mean, even think about musicians that sing their favorite artists' songs, or think about writers that will, I hear about famous writers that will actually rewrite their favorite books from start to finish and cover to cover. They're not going to try to resell that book. But while they're writing it, while they're imitating it, they get the prose, they get how the words sit next to each other. And then they're like, oh, I like the way that works. How can I use that in my own work? So this is kind of like how artists work. So I think that people that worry about if you're people copying, maybe are not too familiar with the arts, because I think another thing too is like when you hear someone say, "Oh, you're copying," it's kind of like a childish thing to think. I mean, it would be completely different if we're trying to plagiarize, or if we're trying to pretend like someone else's work is our own. So that is like a big difference. But either way, when it comes to learning, it really is important to figure out what you like. And that doesn't even just mean the paintings that you like. It could be, what do you like to wear? What are some colors that you gravitate towards? What music do you listen to? And what is the culture surrounding the music that you listen to? Your favorite stories, books, movies, gaming, whatever it may be, any kind of entertainment that you like. Why do you like that? And how can you take those things and apply it to your own artwork? Okay, so real quickly, I'm going to be showing you that I'm adjusting everything in my piece. I realized that everything was out of place. It wasn't in the right positioning. So I'm actually just painting over it and starting again to make sure that it is in the right place. That's another great thing about doing thumbnail sketches, is you can fix whatever you want to fix as you go. Have this shadow kind of working through. So if you're doing this one, I would highly suggest doing this one, mainly because there's a lot of things that you can play with, and not just how you work with your paint colors, still using a shade of blue. It's not the same blue that we were using in the previous studies, but this tint, it's more of like a tint of blue, right? Because it's lighter in value. It's almost close to a white. So you can play with how you're going to lighten and darken your orange or the blue. Another thing to consider is the black that I'm using will, I believe that the black that I'm using has an undertone of blue in it. So that's also going to shift the color of your, the light blue and the orange. I got a little bit off topic, so if that did not make sense to you, just ignore it. Okay, so let's go back to what we were talking about. Oh, right. So, things that you can play with in this piece while you're working is adding some water to your paint and seeing how that layers. When you add water, it's going to thin the paint out, and it's going to change the opacity level. Meaning, if something is opaque, you cannot see through it. And if something is transparent, you can see through it. So by playing with the transparency, you can really see the layers that you've added underneath, or not, by making it more opaque, which means more water or less water. All right, so let's take a look at the composition at this moment in time. We have the action really covering the bottom 2/3 of the piece. I think that when the gun is added in and the action of the gun firing, that action is really going to be the thing that draws everyone to the center of the piece. Because anytime that you have a diagonal line in the center of the piece with something bright like the explosion from the gun, anytime that happens, that very specific thing happens. But when in this piece, when they did that, it was very, intentional. It was intentional because they knew that that would draw the viewer's eye to it. It's a diagonal line. It's a bright, high contrast thing. The action is very intense. So you know that you're going to be like, well, what is that first? That's a gun. Oh, it's being shot. It's activated. Activated? It's being shot. But after that action has taken place, then you can start working around that. Who is shooting the gun? Ah, that looks like a monk. Interesting element to the storyline. Who is this guy? Who's being shot at? Why is he being shot at? So that's one thing about this piece was, if it's as a standalone, You don't really have a lot of information about the guy being shot at. You could maybe, if this was a standalone piece, you'd be feeling sympathy towards him. But as I noted before, this is not a standalone piece. This is one of 6, and it kind of works as like a comic strip. And I'm looking at the time. We only have 3 minutes left, about 3 to 4 minutes. And look how loose it is. Like, I didn't put a lot of detail into this. I think that's the way you should kind of tackle these, really. The ones where I try to add too much detail, oh my gosh. Like, I like watch it and I'm like, really? Come on. Why are you doing this? I think the thing is like, while making these, I was also listening to an audiobook. So sometimes I start like playing with details and stuff. I'm a really good part of the audiobook, trying to like see what happens in there. So it's really good that I speed these up for you so you're not sitting through. It's fun to paint. It's fun. It's a fun activity. So I'm hoping that when you take these on, you're not putting too much pressure on yourself to make them look perfect, because first of all, striving for perfection is ridiculous being a human, you know. Now if you are a robot striving for perfection, that might be something good for you to strive for as a robot. But as a human, you know, like the way we grow and the way we learn is through mistakes. So embrace the mistakes and have fun with it. Really. Maybe find a good audiobook. I could recommend some good ones. Real fast before we go, the shadows are also creating this diagonal line pulling across, leading lines through the action. Sorry, the vertical line going down to the diagonal lines and horizontal lines cutting across to the action. Are you guys seeing the golden spiral happening here? I am, and it really is, I think, what makes this piece so pleasing. You're leading the viewer's eye around, and it doesn't really matter where you're starting on the spiral. You know, you're probably starting where the action is taking place, but either way, the composition itself is leading the eye all the way around. And this is why I think it's a really good piece to do in our composition course. Anyhow, I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.